Introduce you to my vintage 1992 Toyota pickup truck. Yep. It's been totaled 3 times. It's got 310,000 miles on it. And I just keep hammering the dents out of it, driving it. It's got a set of beautiful mid-90s Oldsmobile Delta 88 wheels on it. Tires are huge for this vehicle. Just to keep everybody guessing, this side is black because it's been the most beat up. Of course, we've got the Pink Floyd sticker on it. Of course, the element is my toolbox. And today, we're going to be addressing this. All right, I've already addressed it actually. This is the battery terminal, which broke, was falling off. So when I'd go around a turn, the truck would try and shut off. I replaced it with one of these, which seems kind of cheesy, but we'll see how it works. My truck has a lot of custom features, such as that one-of-a-kind hood hold-down strap, a hood that doesn't actually fit on it. The prop rod is what's called a curb key for turning off water meters. We're going to put some extremely cheap oil in here in a minute. This big area where there's nothing is where the airbox is supposed to be. The last wreck I had, I hit a deer, shoved the core support back into the engine bay, smashed that, smashed the timing cover, smashed the water pump, smashed the distributor, smashed the radiator, smashed the fan. So I ended up moving my air intake over to this side of the vehicle, which was quite a wiring job. And we now have an electric fan instead of the mechanical fan. I just recently replaced the timing cover, which is notorious on the 22R Toyota motor. Because they live so long, the chain can actually eventually chew through the chain guides and the timing cover and dump all your water into your crankcase, which is a fun little feature of the 22R. So I just had to replace that. If you don't have hundreds of thousands of miles on your Toyota, you're probably not going to have a problem with that. But today, we're fixing that battery terminal. I need to get a good battery tie-down system because that one doesn't really work very well. And I'm going to replace the oil filter with this cheeseball cheap Fram because, like I said, the crankcase got full of water, and so we're going to run a few of these cheap Fram filters through it and some cheap oil in rapid succession, maybe 1,000 miles in between, to try and clean out the crankcase. That's what we're doing today. You Honda guys complain about the starter being up under the intake, but honestly, how often do you have to replace a starter? On this particular vehicle, the oil filter is up under the intake. Ew, that's nasty. Ugh. So I've already drained the oil on this one. Now the hard part is actually putting this sucker back. It's actually not as difficult since I reworked the intake. But this is some sort of, I don't know, ricer turbo thingamadoodle. I don't know what it's for. But I found it, and it got my intake back here where I wanted it. Eventually I'm thinking about putting a hole over here and putting a snorkel on it because it does flood where I live. And this truck has twice been flooded underwater, and it's come back every time. Here's my mailman and his element. So that's about it for this beautiful cream puff today. I'm going to do a few more oil changes on it, try and clean the crankcase out. A couple more things about the Toyota pickups. This is a 1992. It has the 22R, which is fuel injected for this year. They switched from a timing chain to a timing belt. Personally, I'm more a fan of the timing chain, so I'd stick with the pre-1995 Toyota. The first vehicle I ever drove when I was learning how to drive was a 1974 Toyota Hilux. I love that thing. It had an 18R motor in it, carbureted obviously. In my 20s, I bought a 1987 Toyota one-ton pickup, long bed, which looked like any other little Toyota pickup, but it had a much bigger suspension, bigger brakes, and was built a lot heavier. But you wouldn't know it just by looking at it. I didn't know it until I bought a set of brakes for it and they were the wrong size. Also had the 22R motor in it, fuel injected. I think that was the first year for fuel injected. The motor's just, it runs like a clock. I mean, it never shuts down, runs forever. If you don't run into something, it'll probably live forever. Keep the oil changed, that kind of stuff, set the valves. Just like the Hondas, it's got adjustable valves. You got to adjust them every 100,000 miles or so. As I mentioned earlier, it's been totaled 3 times. A guy ran into the front one time. It took a lot of time, and I put everything back together, and I painted it and everything, got it looking perfect. And about 6 months later, I hit a deer with it. Ripped the whole front end off. Just kind of threw some parts on it and got it running again. A couple of years later, I hit an 8-point buck that just crushed it. I let it sit here in the yard for the rest of the winter. And finally, my wife started asking me what I was going to do with it. And I said, well, I'll take a couple hours and see if I can get it to run. And if I can get it to run, maybe I'll put it back together. So that's what I did. I had to rework the intake and the cooling system and everything else. And it kind of became an experiment in how little money can I spend on this thing and keep it running. And that was probably 100,000 miles ago. So it's got some things that have been neglected that probably should have been taken care of by now, like the front suspension's a little loose, the steering's a little wobbly, needs front shocks, probably needs rear shocks. They got the wrong size wheels on it. I'm gonna keep running those. I should probably put some bigger brakes. Those wheels came off of an Oldsmobile 88 that I had that floated away in the 2010 flood. This truck also floated away in the 2010 flood, but unlike the Oldsmobile, this thing started back up when I blew the cylinders out. Take the plugs out, crank it over a few times, spray it full of some kind of starter fluid, put the plugs back in, fire it back up, and it ran. I've been told that this specific model is somehow desirable and worth a bunch of money. I find that hard to believe, a 1992 short bed Toyota pickup truck. But apparently the kids are fixing them up these days. I don't know. It's old, so it's getting to where it's hard to find parts for at the junkyard. So anyway, I thought I would take a minute to introduce you to one of the vehicles you're probably going to start seeing in Scavenger type. And if you like what you're seeing on here, like and subscribe. See you next week. What?